Hello, I'm Steph from My Driver Classic, and today I'm down at Great British Car Journey in Derbyshire. Now, as part of the attraction, they have something called Drive Dad's Car, and they have a huge fleet of classics that you can take out. And they've had the Granada in the background for a little while, and I said, please, if I ever get the chance to drive that, let me know. And they gave me a call last week and they said, Steph, you can drive the Mark 1 Granada because it's now on the Drive Dad's Car fleet. And I was so excited. And I was excited because when we talk about classic Fords, we don't talk about stuff like the Mark 1 Granada as much as we should do, because we tend to put a spotlight on things like the Escorts, the racing stuff, the Fiesta, anything hot hatch really with a Ford badge on, anything special edition, a Cosworth. You hear all about those, but when did you last see a bit of love for the Mark 1 Granada? Well, outside of the Sweeney. So in today's video, I'm going to be shining a spotlight on the Mark 1 Granada, talking you through the history, walking you around the vehicle so you can bring back those fond memories. We're going to have a look at the dash and then we're going to take it out for a drive. And spoiler, this is my favourite ever Ford I've taken out. So sorry Joe, your Anglia used to have top spot, but I think this Granada has won my heart. Life's too short to drive something boring, so make sure you do something about it this year. I would begin your journey on the Bidding Classics Auctions website. They've got some fantastic cars up for grabs. They've got everything from pre-war stuff right through to the 90s and early 2000s stuff, with an incredible mix of different marques, models and price brackets as well. Now, let's get back to that video and I'll show you what we're doing today. We talked a lot about this in the Escort videos, but the 60s was an exciting time for Ford because you see Ford of England and Ford of Germany come together to become one powerhouse. Now, when the Granada came to market, it replaced cars in both countries, the Zephyr Zodiac in the UK, and it also replaced, I think it was P6 series in Germany. The car came into a relatively easy market to tap into, which was the exec space, and it was a growing market. And the big UK competitors were things like the P6, the Triumph 2000, and the Granada, as you can see here visually, comes in and offers something totally different. And it also comes into that European space, and it offers a pan-European design that was a big hit both in the UK and in Europe. That pan-European approach also meant that it had to compete with cars like the BMW 1800, 2000. It had to compete with the DS. And so when they designed this car, they designed it accordingly because it had to come in and it had to knock the socks off absolutely everything. So you get your things like, I think it's the independent rear suspension, you get a range of engines to suit different price points, which in my opinion is such a great thing to do, and a fantastic 3-litre engine for the top of the range model. The engine choices for the UK were the Essex V4 and V6, and it was the 2-litre on the V4 and the 2.5 and 3-litre on the V6. Different engines were used on the continent and in South Africa. Now, it's worth noting at launch, I believe the car was only available with the 2.5 and 3-litre V6. Now, one of the things I've talked about lately with these Fords and within the Ford videos is how Ford didn't try and pigeonhole customers, and they tried to make their cars widely and easily accessible as possible, which is great for your buyer market and also for your fleet buyer. Now, with the Granada, they did this by badging the early low-spec cars as console, with the idea that the buyer wanting to spend a bit more money would go for those higher specs. The buyer, maybe the conservative fleet buyer, would maybe go for those lower consoles. But what extras could you expect? Well, things like with the Granada, top specs, you would have got your reclining front seats, your separate rear seats, your wood trim on the door and fascia, and then you get your optional extras, including things like automatic transmission, sunroof, power steering, and your GXL version had things like all of that, plus you get your tinted glass, and you also get your vinyl roof covering as well. So there's quite a big selection there of different bits you can get for wherever you come in at the different price points. Now, if you've never heard of that console badging, it might be because it was dropped in the autumn of 1975, but by that point they had so many things were coming as standard that even the basic range entry-level cars was something worth shouting about. One of the biggest successes of the range, however, wasn't just the speed, which at top of the range beat things like the Triumph 2000. So for comparison, the Triumph 2000, I think it's just a 2 litre, does 0 to 60 in 13.6 seconds, whereas the Granada comes in and says in the brochure, whichever Granada you go for, you can do 0 to 60 in less than 10 seconds. Now that is an incredibly large jump of over 3 seconds, and it really does make an impact with buyers. And also with fleet buyers that are looking to get everywhere quite quickly on a budget. And this is the thing, fleet buyers will help drive all the sales, because from police to taxi and even undertakers who have them coach built into hearses, the Granada seemed to be a car that could do it all. Ford described it as the finest car they'd ever made, built to the highest standards of safety, and they said from the get-go it was a successful car. Ford designed this as a car with not only comfort and long mileage in mind, but also driver and passenger comfort too. I don't think I've ever heard a bad word said about the Granada in all the years that I've been talking about cars and talking about Fords. But how does it hold up today? Well, let's take a closer look.
Now this is an exciting Granada because it's not any Granada, it's a Granada GXL. But what does that really mean? Well, by the time you get to GXL, you get a few added extras. You get a sunroof. Now I'm not going to touch this because I tend to find that old sunroofs tend to be quite problematic, and people always highlight concerns that once you've opened it and it can mess with seals. So we're not going to touch that today, but I'm just highlighting that's there for you. We've got the vinyl roof on the outside, which you've already spotted, and you've got your fog lamps to the front, which you've probably already spotted as well. So a few extra bits to bring us up into that GXL space. It's such an exciting car because, as the 1973 brochure said, every single model went up to 110 miles per hour. Now, we might have a speed limit in Great Britain of 70 miles per hour, but remember, they weren't just thinking about that British space. Like cars like the Anglia had, it just thought about what does this serve the British buyer. This had to serve the European buyer. It had to be at home as much on a side street of Great Britain in a small town as it did on the bustling autobahn of Germany. It needed to be at home and competing vividly in every single space. And I think looking at it with contextual eyes, not comparing it to a car of the modern day, I think it does that quite well. But how have they used this space inside? For me, I think there's a couple of bits that I would change, and there's a couple of bits that I think they do very well. So first of all, these seats, my goodness, this is the thing, because when they were doing it, they said that they were looking at cars, even like Mercedes, they were looking at BMW for how they'd achieved comfort, and these seats are just as comfortable as, I would say, some of the luxury vehicles like the Rolls Royces, like the Bentleys of the 70s. They are extremely comfortable. Now let's talk about something I would change. I'm running through the dash from left through to right. This clock feels really far away. Everything else I feel is very much with driver comfort in mind. The clock over there feels quite misplaced. I think it should have been maybe here or up here. It should have been somewhere else. But something they do get right over here is when you go to open this glove box, the button is up here. And it means that it doesn't ruin this streamlined section of dash, and it keeps it all very neat and tidy. Storage, in fact, is a real buzzword in this car because you've got pockets down there, you've got this space up here in front of the clock. Again, if you're using this space, you're going to be hiding the clock. You've got your armrest with inbuilt space. You've got a cubby hole over here. The space has been used so well, and there's so much storage really to put all your bits and pieces that it makes it such an attractive proposition for that executive market before we've even taken it out for a drive. Coming into the centre here, you've got your stereo. Now I believe this Motorola stereo is the original. We come down into the heater controls, and then something I wasn't expecting to find, this little knob here. Now turn this, and that controls the balance of your speakers. Now I know that when you look at, if you look at salesman spec sheet for one of these at the time, it says, look at all the features. We've put more in than your buyer is expecting to find. And they're right. You've got a cigar lighter, and I believe this is fitted as standard. Now that looks like it's the original. It looks exactly like it does in the brochure photos. Coming down from there, we've got an automatic transmission. Now this might put some people off, because if you look at reviews from the time, and from about 72, 73, they do say that if you take out the auto, you tend to find it's a few seconds slower than the manual in getting up to 60. But for today's sedate drive, I don't think we're going to notice that so much. Coming in front of us, you've got a few gauges deeply inset into that dash. Now, I quite like that, because quite often when something's quite shallow, as soon as the light hits it, it can be quite hard to read. When it's set deeply in, it makes it easier when you've got the sun beaming down. So you've got your fuel gauge, you've got your temperature gauge, you've got your rev counter, and again, that was something they said that buyers might not expect to find because it wasn't a sporting vehicle. Over to the right here, you've got your speedo with an inbuilt trip clock. You've got your ammeter, and coming down there, you've got your oil pressure gauge as well. Now, these were two other dials that they said that buyers might not be expecting to find. You've got your side and main beam lights there, and then this is something that I really like. So when you go to put your wipers on, all the controls are just there, look, in your hand. Now let's get it started up. I want you to hear what it sounds like. Check written park, have a listen. Now, with it being warm day, I have got that back door open and this side window open, so it might sound a little noisier inside than what you'd expect, but as I talked to you about when we're walking around, Ford really got it right when they said that they were thinking about that noise, they were thinking about long drives and the comfort. Yeah, that's lovely. Have a listen from the outside as well. Right, let's go on an adventure. Now, it's quite a sedate one today because the Drive Dad's car route isn't actually on the road. However, I have wanted to get my hands on a Mark 1 Granada, well, for ages. So to be able to even take one out for just this small drive is such a privilege. There's no other way to describe it. And this example, whether it's this example, whether it's all Granadas, this drives better than some of the cars I've taken out from the 1980s and the 1990s. What on earth is going on? Oh, I absolutely love this. It's such a pleasure to drive. I'm going to mention actually, it's got power steering, which probably does make it easier than than it might be without, but my goodness, what an absolute dream to drive. I looked at it and I was almost, because I've been in the Morris Minor all week, a little bit intimidated. I thought, oh God, is it going to feel massive when I take it out for a drive? But I just feel like I'm in absolute luxury. I've never driven a Ford and felt quite like this. This is really, really nice. Now, a couple of bits to tell you. So first of all, this was the first of the big Fords to have rack and pinion steering. It's got all independent suspension. And I know that it was put out there into the executive car market, and so therefore it was supposed to be a car which people could drive loads of miles in, and it would feel special, and it was supposed to, you know, supposed to compete with the best that the best out there. That's what they said. That it had a really bold ambition, and you know what? Even putting our foot down in that auto, so I'm going to put my foot down again. Woo. This is one of my favourite cars that I have driven in absolutely ages. And I thought I was going to feel intimidated because it feels like such a large car when you get in. And I don't always tend to favour some of these exec cars. Sometimes they can feel quite cumbersome or wallowy. But look, even as I take it round the roundabout, I feel so confident driving it. It is such a pleasurable car. Oh, I have zero criticisms. It's so nice. Why is everybody so obsessed with all the sporting Fords and the Escorts? I've been out in quite a few Escorts and none of them have wowed me like this Granada. This feels like luxury on a scale with stuff that is far more expensive than this was. Was this the cheapest Ford? Absolutely not. But you know what? I bet this changed so many people's perceptions of what Ford could offer and what Ford were doing. They got this so right. I would absolutely love to take this out on an autobahn or really test it to its limits and see what it's capable of. Because even now, sitting in it 50 years, over 50 years since it was launched, for me, this competes with cars that are 10, 15, even 20 years newer. It's relatively quiet inside. Even though it's got over 60,000 miles on the clock, you're not hearing loads of bangs and rattles. Even as we go over some of these speed bumps, it ticks every box. The boxes that I didn't even expect it to tick. I think I would probably be quite nervous parking it because I'm still, as I drive around, getting used to how big it is, spatial awareness wise. But I think maybe that's because I feel like I'm seated maybe an inch or two lower than I would like to be. But for a car which I'm certainly not the demographic for it, it's certainly never really been on my radar as a car that I'd like to own. But if I had a family or I was doing a lot of miles on a regular basis and I wanted a classic that was a real mile muncher and wasn't necessarily a Jag or something like a Rover 75, because I think people always go for that sort of thing, this for me would tick the box. I absolutely love it in a way that I didn't expect to. And that's the greatest thing sometimes about taking cars out, is that you don't always expect the expected. So I've just got in this today and I love it, and I'm trying to think up some critical bits that I can maybe give you at home that I don't like about it. And I think my biggest criticism is I can't take it out on a motorway and see its full potential. But even though it's an auto and people will be like, oh, it's an auto and you should have tried a manual, look, I've got enough power to keep up with the traffic. I can feel that I've got that power. It handles beautifully even over this rocky terrain. The steering wheel feels light in my hand. It doesn't feel, sometimes you're really ragging a wheel round, and sometimes you're getting power assisted stuff from this era and the power assisted feels too light and it feels almost skittish. This is right. Ford got this right. I really like this. Let's talk more about Ford Granadas. I'm blown away by this. I'm so at home in this in a way that I didn't expect. And when they did the brochures, they said that everything was in a fingertips reach. They're right. Look, I can reach the, even though I'm short, I can reach the radio, I can change the dials, I can use my cigar lighter, I can adjust the balance on the speakers. Everything that I need, from my armrest through to everything being within a fingertips reach. It's right. Ford got this right. We need to talk more about the Granada. We need to give it more love, more attention. It ticks the boxes. Now, this is a very happy test drive from me. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Bizarrely, didn't expect to have Ford Granada as a must-have on my 2023 bingo sheet, but here we are. It's a great car. If you get a chance to drive one, and whether as a driver or a passenger, go out in one. If you like this car as much as I like this car, you can test it at Drive Dad's Car. All the details are in the description box below. It's relatively new to the fleet, so if you're watching this video and it's not on the website yet, don't panic, give the team a call and they'll get you booked in. But that's it from me today. I hope you've enjoyed it. We actually do have more Ford stuff coming up. I've been offered a lot of Fords and I've jumped at the chance to book them all. So until next time, when we might be back in another blue oval, take care and drive safely.